Welcome back to the Finding Flow State podcast for episode 2. And today is a big one because it sets the foundations for the rest of the course. It is why use a blockchain. Now, blockchain technology, if you speak to anyone in the industry, is going to revolutionize the world. And I'm one of the believers of that. But to understand its impact, its power, we need to unpack exactly what it is and what it does. So to get started, Lane, can you give us a high-level definition of what a blockchain is?
Yeah, so a blockchain is a very specific, distributed, and often, in the case of a public blockchain, decentralized protocol that effectively runs what you can imagine as the internet. It runs, in this case, smart contracts as programs. At its very core, blockchain is just a protocol for sharing information around the world. And the way that that protocol is written ensures a certain level of security and integrity for the data that's being shared that goes beyond the guarantees that you get with just sort of like a standard posting something on the internet sort of a thing. And it's those guarantees, it's the integrity of the security of the protocol that lets a blockchain be used for things like cryptocurrency, like programs of value. It lets it be used for the creation of businesses, decentralized autonomous organizations, and lots of other sort of fundamentally value accruing and creating practices and applications that can take place on the internet. So lots of times people like to talk about blockchain as like a public ledger. There's lots of words that we use for this. I don't find those very meaningful. Well, the most important thing to understand about the technology is it's just a protocol for computers to talk to each other. Your computers are already talking to each other every day, but when they're talking to each other via blockchain, they're adhering to a very specific set of rules that helps you as a user know with great certainty that someone is who they say they are, that the money in their account is what they say it is, that the data that they say was there 15 years ago, you can point to and say, I see that data from 15 years ago. And so the structure of that protocol gives it an immutable property, like things are not changing. And that has really widespread impact on sort of the properties that are available to users for the certainty of what they are doing on chain.
I was going to add the question of, you say it's perhaps not useful to describe it as a public ledger, which is true because although it can be, it's not always a public ledger. And I think this is quite a nice place to unpack maybe private and public blockchains because they serve kind of distinct functions, right?
Yeah, that is a very good point. So private blockchains are adhering to a specific security protocol, but they're doing it in a set group. There's a set smaller party of sort of trusted actors that are involved in the management of the nodes who are participating in this protocol. And so that makes a lot of sense in the context of a Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 company that has offices all around the world and wants to ensure that their databases are all consistent and reconciled and that they're all of the same standard, right? That makes lots of sense in the private case. So IBM with Hyperledger, there's been like a number of different really significant enterprise applications of private blockchains over the years. Those have been used for many years. They'll continue to be used. It's a superior way for sharing data and knowing that all the data that you have is the same and hasn't been tampered with. The blockchains that get a little bit more attention in the news are public blockchains. And so those are ones that anybody can participate in, anyone can use, anyone can, within sort of the restraints of legal and regulatory restrictions, anyone can purchase whatever is on those chains and can participate in the social protocols, have a profile picture, etc. So public blockchains are like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Flow. Those are all public blockchains. And those are the chains that people can, like we and anyone who's listening to this could go out and make an account on a public blockchain today if they wanted to. A private blockchain is behind access that you wouldn't have unless you're in a set group of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one. I think my role in this episode, because it's going to be semi-technical, and I think we would rather hear from Noah and Lane about the more technical things, is I'm going to talk about the misconceptions I see every day with these sort of terms. One of the misconceptions I see all the time with blockchains is people think they are anonymous. And my quick answer to that is they're not anonymous, they're pseudonymous. But could you unpack exactly, what that means? Like, why are they not anonymous? In what way are they not anonymous?
Correct. Right. This is definitely something that is a very general misconception. The idea of thinking that you're anonymous on a blockchain comes from not having your name. You know, your identity is just a string of random numbers and letters that is mostly incomprehensible by anybody. But all of your transactions, everything you do with this address is can be tracked. Right. And the way you access the blockchains is usually through public and not public, actually private companies, right? Like if you go to an exchange, Kraken, Binance, they're private companies and you depend on them for your wallet. Like when you deposit money there, they own that wallet. You don't have the private keys to them. You don't control when to move it. You have to ask them to move it and then wait for them to confirm. So through that, these companies, they usually have know your customer service, right? They go through your ID, they know who you are, they know your bank account. So it's very easy for any agency to just go through to these companies, check the database and see what address is associated with your email, with your bank account. And from then on, they just will know absolutely everything that you do on the blockchain with that address. So in a way, it's actually not private at all. It's super, super public. It's actually the extreme public. Now, there are ways to actually be anonymous on the blockchain, and that would require a little bit more of technical knowledge. You can create your own Bitcoin wallet yourself and have your own private key yourself and manage all of those things.
I think one of the things when it comes to like anonymity on chain, it's something that some people do want, but and it can be achieved. There are protocols that try and preserve someone's privacy, and there's a very big in the news for the past couple of years. There's been a lot of high profile legal battles about privacy protocols and mixers, like Tornado Cash is a big legal battle going on there. I think when it comes to anonymity, where people really don't realize how much information you can glean from the public blockchain, it can be seen with people like there's a guy called Zach XBT. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He calls himself an on-chain sleuth, and essentially he tracks down people that steal and scam in crypto, and he tracks them down their names. He's even tracked down. He's linked scams back to the Lazarus Group, which is a North Korean hacking collective, and
Yeah.
very very hard to pin anything on on
Yeah.
them. So you can trace it back, and I think that's an important point when working in the blockchain space, and it ties back what we said in the first episode about reputation. If it was fully anonymous, reputation kind of wouldn't exist, because who's going to remember those long wallet addresses? So I think that's an important point. Okay, we've given enough time, I think, to blockchain definitions. Let's move on to really the engine of Web3, which is smart contracts. Now, Noah, can you explain to us what a smart contract is and what it does for Web3 for crypto?
The simplest explanation of what a smart contract is a permanent way to interact with the blockchain that is public and transparent and has a predetermined non-changeable result, right? So when you want to transfer your coins, you don't have to go to the bank to ask them to transfer your bitcoins. You go directly to the blockchain and you interact with public, transparent code that you can verify the outcome of. So that's the part that is trustless about it. It works as intermediate to replace third parties. And you no longer have to trust the bank or trust anybody to do what you want with the blockchain itself. So the way I see the blockchain is a public database that is secure and transparent, and the smart contracts is just the public ways for people to interact with this database.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I see people believe about smart contracts is that they're in some way intelligent, which is not the case, right?
Definitely not. I think what they mean with smart contract is that the predecessor, the original contract is written
Yeah.
in paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't do anything for you. So every time somebody's electricity to anything, they want to call it smart. Like your smart TV, your
Yeah.
smart fridge or whatever. Well, it's really not. It's just code that works when you do certain things. It doesn't act on its own. It's not connected to AI in any way. So it's just smart in the sense that it does something more than the usual contract, right? That's how I see it.
Absolutely.
I just want to emphasize the smartness is it comes from conditions being met and then an action immediately being taken, which like a paper contract, if the paper contract is the dumb contract, a human has to pick it up and do something for something to happen. In the case of a quote unquote smart contract, it once conditions are a preset list of conditions are filled or met, then you're able to have the contract execute itself, which could be transferring somebody an NFT, a fungible token, anything like that. But they're definitely not, like as Noah was emphasizing, it has nothing to do with AI or anything like that. It's only as smart as the person who coded it, and then it's smart in that the protocol will be alive to take autonomous action if a user or a person isn't there to pick up the contract and do something with it.
Yeah, I love that phrase. It's only as smart as who develops it, because not every smart contract is smart. There have been a lot of smart contracts that are being hacked and broken, and a lot of people have lost money because of this. So it's just the name, a smart contract, but yeah, it doesn't think by itself. It's only as good as who wrote it.
Lane mentioned their non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which we have briefly touched on. In what way does a smart contract interact with an NFT? Yeah, what role does a smart contract play in the world of NFTs?
Right. So it's the way that smart contracts play a role in with NFTs, that they are basically the ones that are in charge of knowing who owns what and what is what. Like an NFT collection, 10,000, you gotta know who owns which one of the 10,000s. The smart contract is the one who knows that. The smart contract is the one responsible for transferring them, because it's the one who has to keep track of who has who, and that's basically it, right?
Lane, anything to add?
Well, yeah, just that NFTs are a form of smart contract. Like they're not distinct and separate from smart contracts. You use a smart contract to create a non-fungible token, and so that is one very specific kind of smart contract. Just like a fungible token is a specific kind of smart contract.
I would like to add that, like which we like previously mentioned, these contracts, somebody is writing them, right? Just like any legal contract, there's a lawyer or whatever, someone is writing this. And when we come to these terms like fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens, what they are they're human constructs, right? They're standards that people agreed on, so that were going to be applied using these smart contracts. So there are basically standards that we sometimes even update and change, and only the contracts, the smart contracts that follow these standards, are considered NFTs or fungible tokens, depending the standard of they're following.
Okay, and where do fungible tokens fit into this? And I think it'd be, we perhaps didn't touch on this, but Noah, could you explain the difference? Because it's fairly intuitive, but it's not obvious what the difference between fungible and non-fungible tokens are.
Right. I think the confusion comes from the word fungible. It's not a word that is like used to be very common before crypto. It just means the tradability of it, right? Like when you exchange $10, then is in the amount, but not in the unit itself. Fungible token is $100, and it shows the dollar, the amount that is being tracked. While the non-fungible tokens is the uniqueness, is an ID that is unique in the whole blockchain, that identifies this object. Even within the smart contract, each of these objects are unique.
That's how I see it. Is fungible tokens are interchangeable, whereas non-fungible tokens aren't. You can't swap one for another without some sort of loss in some way, even if it's minor. We mentioned NFTs in earlier episode. Obviously, it's one of the most famous parts of Web3, of crypto, of blockchain use and smart contracts. What is the difference between non-fungible and fungible tokens? Lane, I'm going to put this to you because it seems intuitive, and it is to a degree, but it also, there can be some confusion there. So what's the difference between a non-fungible and a fungible token?
Fungible things can be broken into many, many pieces, and which exact piece you have doesn't matter. It's the quantity of the thing that you have that matters. Non-fungible tokens, they're not divisible into parts. If you divide them into parts, they don't, like if you snap your phone in half, it's no longer a useful unit, right? Like if you have a half of a non-fungible token. So non-fungible tokens are unique. They're typically one of one. Sometimes they're one of a collection, but they're characterized by their inability to be broken up into different parts and by the importance of which exact part you're holding, because the difference between holding a cat arm and a cat leg is huge, right? Like you can't make a cat out of 5 legs. You need one core and 2 arms and 2 legs. So yeah, non-fungible is like highly unique, not divisible, cannot be easily traded. Fungible tokens are like very easily broken up. Doesn't matter which one you have, it's the quantity you have and that it's in your possession that most matters with those ones.
Can you give an example of a fungible token?
So Bitcoin's a fungible token, ETH on Ethereum is a fungible token, Flow on Flow is a fungible token. Non-fungible tokens would be like CryptoKitties or an art project. One image would be an NFT.
Let's move on to another use case of smart contracts, which is automated market makers. Now, this is one of the most profound uses. Again, I think the term, maybe it's a crypto thing, but they like to make pretty complicated terms. Noah, can you break down what exactly an automated market maker is?
Sure. So yeah, I think automated market maker is kind of a crypto term, but just because they are adding the automated part, I think market makers were already there and before in the stock market or whatever. But the automated part is just instead of having these institutions where you have to trust them to do all of this trading for you, you do it through a smart contract. So you usually is an automated market maker smart contract, and this is usually the cornerstone of DeFi, decentralized finances, all of this stuff. Uniswap is an automated market maker. You go there, you can trade your token for any other token automatically. You don't need to go to Robinhood, trust that Robinhood won't steal all of your stock and that you won't be able to take it out. You just go to Uniswap and you can trade or even stake.
Lane, anything to add there? Why is it such a powerful concept?
We talk about this a lot with the coordination theme of this course, but the ability to facilitate trade is like one of the killer superpowers of public blockchains. So AMMs just like really bring liquidity to one spot. You come in with your fungible tokens, and then there's a liquidity pool of those tokens that people are willing to trade. And because there's so many people gathering in one place to do these trades, it's possible to do complex trades to settle whatever you have for what you want, even if that exact trade isn't available. So it like really improves the liquidity of these markets, and yeah, the ability for people to trade definitely helps with growth in general. So this is like the center stage for fungible token trading in the world of crypto.
Yeah. Well, the other side of this equation in terms of trade in Web3 is the marketplace. Particularly NFT marketplaces it was very common for people to use them. Even there were people in 2021, there were people in my life that I didn't think had any sort of interest in crypto at all that were using NFT marketplaces, which is, it was brilliant to see.
Yeah.
But smart contracts are obviously integral to the use of marketplaces as well and storefronts. Noah, can you just explain a little bit about how they work, about how marketplaces work?
Sure. I actually really like NFT marketplaces. My favorite is Magic something on Solana. I don't remember now.
Magic
It's-
Eden.
Yeah, Magic Eden. I used to follow them from like the inception of it when it was just Solana, and of course OpenSea is the most famous one. They all work. They are usually smart contracts that facilitate the trade of NFTs. The way it works is usually through East Cross contracts or just a trading part of it. It just facilitates the way of listing your NFT that you have for any value that you want and allowing anybody to come in and say, hey, I want that one. I have the money. Let me just get it, right? And the real world example of this is usually, there are marketplaces everywhere. You usually go somewhere and you can buy something by just offering the money to it, but usually you go to somebody else, like a storefront. Somebody's there offering the list or catalog to you, and they go and get it for you. But in the difference of NFT marketplace, you don't have to trust anybody. You just go and get everything you want right away if you have the money for it, right?
Yeah, I think marketplaces were, crucial to the growth of NFTs in particular. And I think that's where, Lane, we should ask you, what role did it play in the growth of CryptoKitties in particular?
For people that love to collect things, trading things is like the next. Once you collect something, the next thing you want to do is trade it, and the marketplace is where that happens. Like if you want to trade two cats because one of them has favorable traits, the tradability of things that you're collecting is what makes them inherently interesting, because it's only when you get to list it on a marketplace that you get the social clout of having owned this thing, and that's where you go to get other stuff that you're excited about. So I think the marketplaces and what they brought to NFTs, like they brought everything to NFTs. NFTs without marketplaces are just a collection of Pokemon cards in your closet that nobody sees and you never get to play with. The marketplace is like, this is where you go to play with it. This is where you go to see what other people are doing. It just really brings the whole thing to life.
Yeah, I think what was fascinating for me is I worked with two companies during the last bull run. One was the most played blockchain game at that time, which was Alien Worlds, and the other was a marketplace called Atomic Hub, which is still running. And what the marketplaces did is they didn't only facilitate trade. I mean, that is what they did, but the pace and the scale at which people were able to trade meant that games could be built and allow free trade within the games, like particularly large games, sort of MMO style games where trading is a key gameplay component. They enabled these games to be able to trade on chain constantly and really quickly. And I think when you look at, marketplaces in Web 2, like eBay, for example, although they have huge volumes, it's kind of sluggish and slow. And with the Web3 marketplaces are so quick. And it means that the volume of transactions that are moving is crazy. And at the moment, we've seen a huge spike in NFTs again this month. It's up something like, the total sales volume is up something like 74% in the last 30 days. But what's really interesting to me is that this number is always eclipsed by the number of transactions. So if somebody, for example, it spikes how much the sales volume is, but then a lot of this comes down to people buying a CryptoPunk for £500,000 or dollars or whatever, which kind of skews the numbers a little bit. It doesn't mean loads of people are using the marketplace. It just means that a few rich people are playing with it. However, what we've started to see in the past few months is the number of transactions has shot up, which means the number of people buying and selling things on these marketplaces has shot up. And that means that we're starting to see people come back into the space, utilizing NFTs and utilizing marketplaces, which I think is it's just really interesting, and it shows how important, I mean, integral to crypto these marketplaces are. So probably is it my favorite? Yeah, probably my favorite use of smart contracts. And the last one we have on the list, I'm going to pass this over to you, Noah. Maybe second place for me, decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs. Now, it can be a kind of complicated area. Again, extremely wordy, complicated name, as crypto loves to do. What is a DAO, and why would we use one?
Yeah. So just to connect a little bit back with what you just said, because I wanted to mention that NFT marketplaces, big favor for me too. They are kind of addictive. The whole searching for your particular trade and seeing if they are going up or whatever. And the beautiful part of it is it's all public. All the data you get of how much volume is going on is all public, and you don't have to, some companies fake those numbers for sure. Speaking of companies, a DAO for me is basically that is a public company in a way that it can be governed and managed by the people that are involved with it. And that's where the names comes from, is that decentralized autonomous organizations. We talk about the autonomous in the sense that it's not completely autonomous, of course. It depends on your level of security. But the decentralized part is the big part of it. Is it's a company in a sense that they're getting work, they're producing value and generating money, and it's all public and transparently distributed. You know how much your partner is getting paid. If he's doing the same job that you are you both getting paid the same, or he's getting paid more? So that's one of the biggest pluses of this type of things.
Yeah, DAOs are definitely an attempt to bring business definition to the world of crypto. And like Noah was saying, I think it's important to sort of help teams formalize, but they are just one very particular flavor of a smart contract with sort of, money coming in for things that are happening usefully, money going out to the people who are making those useful things happen. And in the middle, it's still lots of human action. So it's like, it's definitely not the case that these like quote unquote businesses or DAOs are running themselves. They're just a smart contract that is specifically designed to represent ownership of sort of a project, an initiative, or some collective of contracts, and codify who's responsible for that and how they're going to divvy up funds in order to make sure that the mission of the DAO as outlined is accomplished. The beautiful thing, like Noah said, is that that's all transparent, so you can see who's getting paid for what. You can vote new people in. You can take other people out if they're not being as effective. And there's lots of good history to be able to point to and say who those contributors are and what they should be getting as a result of that. So it's an extra layer of transparency and accountability to what is otherwise like a very opaque corporate practice.
Do you think that will perhaps deter perhaps traditional businesses from utilizing DAOs in any way? It seems like modern companies might go that way, or if you're creating something, you might want to turn it into a DAO now. But it feels like you might see some pushback and resistance from legacy sort of organizations.
Definitely. Yeah, no, this is not something that businesses are pushing for. I think it's something consumers are pushing for. It's something that like the audience of crypto, the community of crypto is highly attuned to the importance of accountability and transparency. And they want to see good outcomes from whatever they're supporting. So they're pushing for this, and they're starting to put more of their dollars towards projects that are going in this direction. I think it'll be a very slow phase out of it'll just be consumer dollars funding the more transparent companies and slowly transitioning away from the less transparent ones. But it's very seldom the case, I would say, that businesses are like jumping up and down to put all their books on a public ledger, because it's, that is definitely a higher bar, but it's one that today's consumers are asking for, because especially when you're like, we're all online all the time, we're interacting with companies all over the world. It's good to have a guarantee in a situation where you can't just like walk to the storefront and take it up with management if there's an issue, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a business model for a new age.
I also feel like, these are great tools. They're advancing humanity, but that doesn't mean that, every company should be public. There's a tool for every task and a task for every tool. So also doesn't mean every marketplace should be public and stuff like that. I think this is the biggest example where, you should know where and when to use the technology.
Great point.
Absolutely.
Great point. We will definitely talk about that more. We have a whole week and a whole episode dedicated to DAOs, so we'll definitely get into that in more detail, but you're so right.
Yeah. Okay, so the final use case we're going to discuss is decentralized applications, or dapps. Now, I mentioned when I was a professional photographer, one of the big problems we had was controlling over your digital art and people using it, plagiarism, and you weren't getting the royalties. And one of my favorite examples of a DApp that I've been talking about recently on the podcast is called Library, although it's spelled LBRY. So I hope it's called Library. I presume it is. It's a decentralized content sharing platform. And I think this is a common theme in everything we've discussed today. One thing it does is it removes intermediaries from having to be involved in any way, shape, or form in you getting your royalties or, whatever for people using your work. So I think that's a great use of a DApp, and that's a DApp that if I was still a professional photographer, I would very much be interested in using. It's so useful because it's not just pictures and video, it's also music, which is a huge area of Web3 that we'll have to discuss at some point. So
I have developed a couple of dApps myself in the past. So basically, they are like an NFT marketplace, right? You see OpenSea, they have a user interface. You have a website that you can go to and click buttons to do all of these transfers and stuff. That's a part of the app. Like you have the user interface, which is a website, which is usually hosted on a private company, but the database where the data is coming from, all the utility and functionality around the dApp is based on smart contracts, right? Everything you're doing is actually interacting with smart contracts on the blockchain through a user interface. So that's, for me, those are the two founding blocks of a dApp is having the blockchain and the smart contracts that facilitate and then having the front end that facilitates these interactions with the user. And that's the basis of building any dApp. Someone who some experience in blockchain development can interact with the blockchain itself directly without a user interface. That wouldn't be considered a dApp. They're just interacting with it directly, but you need a lot of technical knowledge to do that. So dApps have a function which is to closing the bridge, the gap between the user and the blockchain. So simplest explanation from me of what a dApp is the bridge between the blockchain and the user, right? For people that don't know how to interact with the blockchain directly because it's very technical, you build a dApp, which is the user interface is a website that facilitates the functionality around the smart contracts that are already on the blockchain. And so you don't have to learn blockchain development in order to use it. You just use a dApp that someone facilitated for you. One example for me, I think, because this was kind of current, is the Ukraine DAO. So when the war started, someone actually launched a DAO to raise funds for Ukraine. And they did it through auctioning one of a kind NFT that was like the Ukrainian flag in a certain style, right? And they actually raised $5 million out of that NFT. And one of the there were many. This was actually all over the news. There were many benefits for this DAO. And one of them was that through the DAO, the people that were actually on the field could connect with themselves and share communication or stuff, or even or resources. They could get money out of the DAO from there. So
Sorry, it's funny you brought that up. I didn't know you were going to bring that one up. My company donated to that, and I still have that NFT.
Oh yeah, see,
Yeah,
that's
it was
pretty cool.
It's a great use case, great example.
It's amazing, yeah, definitely. There are many applications like that have like I feel at the end, like Lane said, a DAO it shows a mission that people are coming together to or for.
An example of a dApp that is sort of like a collectible gaming example. I talk about this one all the time, but CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties was the first use of the non-fungible token contract on Ethereum, and it had the dApp component was sort of the game mechanic where you were breeding these cats together to make new cats.
Was that back in 2017?
See, yeah, it
So
launched Thanksgiving 2017.
so back then there were no NFT marketplaces or stuff like that. So you basically probably are the pioneers of the apps.
I mean, other people were definitely building at the time, but CryptoKitties was like a very major example for the ecosystem at the time because a lot of the dApps were in 2017. They were like definitely emphasizing ICOs or initial coin offerings, and so people would sort of have a mission statement and something that they would call a white paper, which like may or may not have met the scientific standards of a white paper. But the emphasis was just like fundraising around a mission. And in the case of CryptoKitties, we were like one of the first applications to really give users something to do. We were not there to fundraise. We were just there to sell people digital cats that they got to play with and then create their cat collection. So yeah, from the perspective of like one of the first dApps that was just really about the application and the use, maybe, yeah, one of the early ones for sure.
I mean, if you look at any timeline, crypto timeline worth its salt, they start in around 2008. There is a CryptoKitties entry in almost every timeline, no matter how zoomed out the timeline is. There's almost always a CryptoKitties entry. So just to give you a sense of how much of a rock star Lane is in crypto, she worked on one of the OG projects in the space.
You guys are too kind. We are going to talk. I'm glad you brought up 2008 though, because that really is what started everything. And that is like the big headline of the next episode when we get into the core of true ownership. Yeah, as we bring this episode to a close, the thing that I'm hoping everyone really understands about dApps is that they are much like any other application that you would use. They just come with extra guarantees about the integrity of the data, the sort of knowledge you have about who you're interacting with. And in many cases, they give you opportunities to engage in a much broader ecosystem. but it's an early ecosystem. And so there are some limitations. So you maybe don't have the same availability towards mobile SDKs and building for mobile as you do with non-blockchain based services. Lots of things are web based, but Flow is one of the projects that like really prioritizes a mobile SDK. Solana has, I think, their own mobile phone, so I'm sure there's an SDK for that. And Noah mentioned this, but using the blockchain as your backend is fundamental change from the normal stack. Usually, like you just maintain the database of your dApp, and people just trust you. In the world of blockchain, you have to point to the blockchain as your backend and say, no, this is the hash of the ID of the cat that I gave you, and everyone needs to know that now and forever. Mm-hmm. And maybe the last important thing to know about dApps and how they vary here is that in traditional development, the response time to the user is like highly dependent on sort of how fast your front end resolves, and it's all work that's like highly dependent on what you as a developer are doing. In the world of blockchain, sometimes no matter how good your application is, you are waiting for the chain to finalize a transaction. And so we will get into this in more detail, but transaction finality ends up being something that really impacts the user experience. And it's one of the things that you definitely want to be assessing chains for when you're choosing where to build. So hopefully that's like 100-foot view of dApps for folks. Next week, we are going to be talking about what happened in 2008 that started this whole timeline, and what that meant for true ownership as a fundamental core first why of building on chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be one of my favorite conversations of this whole course, simply because of how impactful it is to so many sectors, including the reason I joined the space. And I'm really looking forward to it. So until next week, I guess, that has been episode 2 of Finding Flow State, and a very macro overview of why you would use a blockchain. Until next week.
Great chatting with you guys as always.
Yeah,
it's good.
Good luck finding your flow state until next week. See you then.
Absolutely. Until next week.